toy.
The Squirrels Who Squabbled by Rachel Bright, illustrated by Jim Field. In a towering forest where summer had been, the cool air bit fresh and the mosses grew green, and as autumn edged in and the sky raged red, the sleepiest creatures got ready for bed, while up in a tree swung a flighty young squirrel, who everyone knew as Spontaneous Cyril. Now most foresty folk had seen to their needs through the plentiful months of mushrooms and seeds. They'd built up their stores so they'd all be well fed through the frosting of winter that glittered ahead. But Cyril, he lived in the now and the here. He'd adventured and partied his way through the year. So his cupboard was empty, his hollow was bare. He hadn't a mouthful of food anywhere. But wait, what was that? Over there, take a look. A single lone pine cone wedged in a nook. He squealed with delight, and for very good reason, for inside were the very last nuts of the season. But Cyril wasn't alone. There were more hungry eyes. Yes, plan ahead, Bruce had his sights on the prize. Though he'd gathered a mountain of bounty hard fought, Bruce was convinced he was one pine cone short. "I simply must have it," he wistfully cried, as he dreamt of the fresh, juicy pine nuts inside. So as Cyril set off on his way to the ground, Bruce, he was also last pine cone bound. They sprinted and scurried with no time to gamble. They scratched at the bark in their scampering scramble. But their panic and haste shook the tips of the spruce, and the pine cone it trembled, and then it came loose. Both squirrels gave chase at lightning pace. This was the start of a wild, nutty race. "It's mine!" shouted Cyril. "No, mine!" hollowed Bruce. "You don't stand a chance. Give up. It's no use." "I'm hungry!" cried Cyril. "This cone is not yours." "Stay back!" shouted Bruce. "This cone's for my stores." It boinged over bushes and flew through the air. It binged on the nose of a slumbering bear. It bounced over boulders, then came to a stop. Then teetered and wobbled and quivered and plop! Both squirrels followed. Oh, the water was fast. Would they learn that they needed each other at last? But each was intent on how he could win, so they didn't quite notice a bird sweeping in. Cyril and Bruce, they watched in dismay as their cone disappeared up, up, up and away. "Come back!" shouted Cyril. "There are nuts!" exclaimed Bruce. But all hope was gone, it was simply no use. And meanwhile they drifted right up to the ledge. Greed, it was driving them over the edge. Cyril and Bruce, they had taken a fall. They were paying the price for wanting it all. They'd squandered their chances to team up and share. Would their nutty young hopes simply end in despair? Bruised and bedraggled, they swept past dry land. Cyril grabbed at a branch with a trembling hand. Catching Bruce with the other, he heaved and he huffed, and dragged him to safety with panting and puffs. They stared at the sky, quite lost in deep thought, until Bruce looked at Cyril and let out a snort. "How silly we are!" he proclaimed, all a jiggle. "How greedy I've been!" spluttered Bruce with a giggle. "We shall change from today, may the squabbling cease. We should celebrate, seeing we're both in one piece." From that day and forward, they made a great pair. They would gather together and found they could share. Yes, Cyril and Bruce, they knew in the end, the best thing to share is a laugh with your friend. The Lion Inside by Rachel Bright, illustrated by Jim Field. In a dry, dusty place where the sand sparkled gold, stood a mighty flat rock, all craggy and old. And under that rock, in a tiny full house, lived the littlest, quietest, meekest brown mouse. He was so very tiny, so incredibly small, that nobody noticed him ever at all. Hello? Ow! He got trod on and sat on and missed out for stuff, ignored and forgotten. Ouch! Yes, mouse life was tough. Meanwhile, far above, on top of the rock, times were quite different. It was Lion o'clock. This huge, toothsome creature made sure everyone saw how important he was by how loud he could roar. He was head of the pack. He was shouty and tough. He loved showing the crowd he was made of strong stuff. Yes, all were impressed by this mighty king cat. If only, thought the mouse, I could be more like that. Then, late one dark night, in his Minnie Mouse bed, the cleverest thought popped into his head. He jumped from the covers and held up a paw. "I've got it," he said. "What I need is a roar. I mean, what if this mouse with the weeniest squeak was a little more grrr and a little less meek? Well, he'd still be the smallest of fuzzy brown mice, but he'd make friends and join in, and life would be nice." Yes, thought the mouse, I must find out how. I will learn how to roar, and I will learn it now. But, oh my gosh, there was only one beast who could teach him this thing, but might make him a feast. It was time to be strong, take a chance after all. Forever was such a long time to feel small. So he made himself brave, and he thought like a winner. He set off for the top, hoping not to be dinner. It felt like the scariest thing he could do. But if you want things to change, you first have to change you. The further he climbed, the closer he got to the slumbering lion reclining on top. Then at last, as he stood on his tippity toes, he found himself suddenly nose to nose. Ahem. Pardon me. Wake up, Mr. Lion, you've got company. Squeak! Mr. Lion, what I've come to you for is squeak. Do you think you could teach me your roar? A silence befell that twinkling plain. Lion opened his eyes and puffed out his mane. Time slowed right down. Why, it felt like a week. Then he opened his mouth and let out an eek. The lion was shaking, his paws all a-fumble. He was backing away with a scrambling tumble. "Don't hurt me," he whimpered. "Oh, try to be nice." Well, my goodness, this lion was frightened of mice. "Don't worry," Mouse peeped. "I'm a friend, not a foe. Let's rock this together. We'll have fun, don't you know?" That was a magical moment for sure, when Mouse didn't feel at all small anymore. He found his true voice and learned to speak out, and for that you don't need to roar or to shout. And from that day and always the two were a pair. They both liked that rock better now that rock was to share. The mouse, while still little, felt big in his head, and Lion, he still roared, but with laughter instead. Yes, that day they both learned that no matter your size, we all have a mouse and a lion inside. The Koala Who Could by Rachel Bright. Illustrated by Jim Field. In a wonderful place where the day was just dawning, and the breezes blew soft on a warm golden morning, in a place where the creatures ran wild and played free, a koala called Kevin clung to a tree. A nicer grey fellow you never would meet, as soft as a soft thing from ear tufts to feet. His favourite way to relax in the sun was to cling and to nap and to munch a leaf bun. And after all this, well, he'd need a nice rest. Yes, Kevin liked sticking to what he knew best. You see, high up was safe since he liked a slow pace, while the ground down below seemed a frightening place. Too fast and too loud and too big and too strange. Nope, Kevin preferred not to move or to change. So he clung to his tree as he knew what to do, and was never too keen to try anything new. So when one bat stopped by and shouted one day, "Hey, Kevin, why don't you come down here and play?" I think," he replied, "I should stay on my plant. I'm busy right now. No, I'm sorry, I can't." "Why not?" cried the Roos, with a super loud cheer. "Yes, why?" called the Dingoes. "There's nothing to fear." But Kevin, who'd never been one to act fast, said, "I've clinging to do, but it's nice that you asked." As Kevin sat watching them chatter and share, a part of him wished he could join in down there. But he knew he'd miss home. It was dark and so late. The whole thing was risky. A venture could wait. Whatever the invite, he'd always say no. Oh dear, it seemed Kevin just couldn't let go. So his life was the same no matter the day. The weeks came and went, and the months rolled away, and Kevin stayed still while the world moved around, until he awoke to a worrying sound. Tap, tap, the sound went. Well, this was a blow. Tap, tappity, tap, 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 tap. Oh no! "Uncling!" the crowd called, which had gathered below. "Leap and we'll catch you. Just let yourself go." But Kevin was scared. "Let go? No, I shan't." "I won't," shuddered Kevin. "Oh dear, I just..." Down came the tree, and with it was bringing crash and a wallop, a Kevin still clinging. Kevin, he carefully opened one eye and looked up at the love staring down from the sky. Then one paw by one paw he loosened his hold. He felt springy and light and happy and bold. The worst thing he could think of had now come to pass, and he was just fine. Why, he felt quite first class. So when Wombat leaned over and held his paw out, Kevin no longer felt worry or doubt. When Dingo asked, "Now will you come out to play?" the crowd all joined in with a "What do you say?" And even though this wasn't part of his plan, Kevin replied, "Yes, I think that I can." And Kevin from then on was always can do. Because life can be great when you try something new. The Whale Who Wanted More by Rachel Bright. Illustrated by Jim Field. Under glittering waves of a vast ocean blue, a beautiful world is hidden from view. And there, in the cool and the quiet of the deep, a great gentle giant was stirring from sleep. With a hubbub of bubbles, he opened one eye, and let out a long, lonely, rippling sigh. For when Humphrey awoke, he remembered his quest, one that pulled at his heart and pressed on his chest, a life-longing search for he didn't know what. He just knew it was something he hadn't yet got. He'd rifled in shipwrecks and rooted through treasure, scooped pretty shells which he'd polish for pleasure. But whether his haul was enormous or tiny, the next day it just never seemed quite as shiny. So he never felt satisfied, that was for sure. And no matter the bounty, he just wanted more. But the more he amassed, the more lonesome he got. He knew it was wrong, but he just couldn't stop. So he drifted, without any sense of direction, till his wanderings washed him, one day, to perfection! A rainbow of reefs kissed with speckles of sun, where all kinds of critters hung out and had fun. There were glistening fishes, crustaceans galore. There were mollusks and dugongs and urchins and more. The coral was studded with flotsam and jetsam. Humphrey just wanted to dive in and get some. Meanwhile, on this reef, once a magical home, chaos and trouble, it bubbled and foamed. Since with so many creatures all crammed in one place, there were too many neighbours and not enough space. They all bickered and sniped, they pushed and they shoved, and so did not notice the shadow above. Except one with a curious stalk of an eye, which luckily always gazed up at the sky. A crab with quick wit and a brilliant mind. Crystal was smart and eternally kind. "Look up!" Crystal shouted. "Look up and look out! The whale who wants more is out and about!" But all were so busy with one gripe or another, they hadn't got time to look out for each other. So Humphrey he plunged in the noise of the brawl, to fill up his longing once and for all. "Help!" they all screamed, griped by panic and fear. But, as everyone froze, Crystal's thinking was clear. "Whale!" Crystal shouted. "Whale, you must stop!" She yelled it so loud that she thought she might pop. "You are the whale who always wants more, but what are you really wanting it for?" Well, Humphrey was utterly taken aback. This feisty young crab stopped him still in his track. He thought very hard for the first time in years, as he gathered his voice, so he fought back some tears. "I don't know," whispered Humphrey. "I think that my goal was to feel all filled up and, well, happy and whole." "You know," replied Crystal, "I think you might find that happiness comes when you're caring and kind. Perhaps," she suggested, with one pincer uncurled, "you might have a gift you could give to the world." Humphrey he hung on her every word, and deep in his soul a melody stirred. He remembered a lullaby taught by his mother, echoed through time and from one whale to another. "I was given one gift when I was brand new, but I've never had someone to give that gift to." Then he opened his mouth, let go of his doubt, and an achingly beautiful tune tumbled out. The turtles they circled, the dolphins were playing, even the seaweed was dancing and swaying. And as harmony touched every one who was there, they remembered that balance takes patience and care. They'd been fighting and poking and griping so long, they'd forgotten they all sang the same ocean song. Humphrey, he knew then, he wanted to stay, as at last all his longings, they had faded away. From then all was rhythm and peace on the reef. For one clever young crab, it was quite a relief. She befriended the whale who perfected the knack of taking the time to give some things back. Yes, that well stopped collecting and made a great start at doing the things that filled up his heart. So perhaps true contentment is not about stuff, since we all need so little to have quite enough.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like